This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio the way it should be heard, the world's greatest radio. I'm Brother Kahari, sitting in with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., the author of 2 of the definitive works of racism. Let's welcome in Mr. Neely Fuller. Mr. Fuller, how are you, sir?
I'm still learning.
Good, good. Mr. Fuller, one of the things that we have looked at is over the time that we've been doing this show is all of the impacts of certain areas on our lives and what those areas have to do and how racism plays a function in that. On this time, I'm going to start off with looking at some areas of entertainment. But before I get to that, I want to talk about your work, your definitive works. Can you tell us how to get those works, Mr. Fuller?
You can get them on the computer by putting in the words producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what should come up on your screen is a brief description of the textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, racism being white supremacy. And then there's an additional book that's a word guide that shows the reader how to use words, what words to look for when other people use certain words, and what questions to ask when these words are used, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because one of the vehicles that the white supremacists uses in order to help to maintain their system of racism and all of these evil practices that go with it is the use of words. They do a lot of it. That's the cement, that's the glue that holds the system together. So they are masters of words. So you have to look for certain words that they use and interpret them in a way that will best counteract what they are doing in a day-to-day situation. And the books are addressed to individuals, individual persons, what a person can do each and every day, because I think that's the compensatory action that needs to make up for what the traditional organizations have probably overlooked, and that's not a condemnation and whatnot. Right. It's just an observation that organizations serve an excellent purpose, but organizations are put together by people, and people are parts of organizations. But the people who are in organizations have to be doing something each and every day, wherever the people might be. And what they are doing each and every minute counts. There's no such thing as dead minutes. When you're deep, yeah. Yes, when you're in the world, you are in motion all the time.
All the time.
Even when you're asleep, you are in motion.
Because you're breathing, you're right.
Yes, right. You're breathing. I mean, you're taking up space and whatnot. So you want to make everything that you do to be in the category of constructive activity. That includes even while you're asleep. Your sleep should be constructive. And so everything now, particularly now, I think, and it should have been this way all the time, people should be carrying out the mission that people are supposed to be carrying out. And so it's just not a matter of just going to meetings and listening to someone talk for a couple of hours and then walk away and then look forward to maybe 2 or 3 weeks going by, 2 or 3 days, and then come back, or every weekend come back, and assemble and say that this is generating power when no one is doing anything different when they leave the meetings. And that is where I say
that's where
in a compensatory.
Right.
That's compensation means making up for what's missing. Well, what's missing is the people get in the habit of doing the same things the same way until they come back to another meeting, in which case discussions are made about what should be done. Everybody comes away from the meeting feeling good, you might say, quote unquote, until the next meeting. And the only thing that's really planned is the subsequent meeting. In other words, you have meetings where you plan to have other meetings. But no one is doing anything between that time.
Right.
And the white supremacists like it that way because they have geared people to that type of thinking, where they just go to endless meetings and nothing ever changes because the people who are going to the meeting never change. They never do things each and every day that were discussed at the meeting, if anything was discussed at the meeting about what to do. That's the missing link.
Okay.
That's where the compensatory action is supposed to come in. When you say something every day, it's supposed to be tailor-made to have a constructive effect. I mean, just saying something in a basic conversation. You're talking with someone. You should ask yourself, am I having a constructive conversation or not? If you're not having a constructive conversation, that talk should be abbreviated immediately. It should be cut out. Now, things will get a lot quieter, but maybe they should. So we can do some thinking before we speak and make sure that whatever you say is going to have a constructive effect. And if it's not having that constructive effect, you go back to the drawing board before you say anything else and try to figure out exactly what went awry, what didn't work. And that's what the books are about.
Right.
It's about thought, speech, and action. Thinking, speaking, and acting. And that's something that people do every day, everywhere on the planet.
Right. Now, Mr. Fuller, you have in your book, one of the areas is entertainment. And one of the profound things that affects us is music. I'm not saying that was perfect, but as I listen to the music or to the sounds that I hear now, some of which I can't even play because I would feel that I was disrespecting people to the degree that it would just, it just wouldn't be something that I would want to do. But I wonder, I'm not saying this was a perfect sound, Mr. Fuller, but I'm wondering how we came from "We're a Winner" to "Keep on Pushing" to "I'm So Proud," all the way to where we are now with some of the madness. I mean, you can be out somewhere shopping, and all of a sudden somebody will pull up. They will get out of the car. I mean, just get out of the car. Pants hanging down to their knees. Leave the music blasting. Leave the key in the car. Leave the music blasting so that everybody can hear who they are. And some of the most vile language. I went into a record store the other day. And children were in there, and I was in there, and everybody. And what they were playing was unreal. It was so bad, Mr. Fuller, I had to leave. I had to, I was going to do it. I said, I can't buy here. And I told the man, I said, I will never come back here because of the level of disrespect we are achieving in our. Mr. Fuller, talk to me because this has had a dramatic impact. I mean, just dramatic impact on all of us. Talk to me about what role things like music play in our environment and how this has been used to really have an impact on us. Mr. Fuller.
Well, you start with the words. And the words, there's a word called music. And then there's another word called noise. Now, both noise and music are forms of sound. S-O-U-N-D. It's just two sounds in the entire universe, just two, noise and music. Even when a person is calling someone, I mean, hey, come over here. That's sound, S-O-U-N-D. That's a sound. Now, is that sound music or is it noise? How can you tell the difference? You tell the difference by the effect that it has on a person's mind when that person hears that sound. Now, that's the conclusion that I came to, and I have that discussed in the book, in the basic textbook. Noise and music as the forms of sound. So that's the criteria. You hear a lot of people arguing back and forth, and this argument has gone on for quite a while. Just didn't start recently. Back in the days when I was much younger, 10, 12 years old, sometimes people would say that if you had a piano in a church, that's the type of sound that you did not want in a church. If it's a real, what you call, country, Baptist, serious, Jesus-worshiping church, you do not have that devil's instrument in that church called a piano, because that same type of apparatus, that same type of box was in what they call the barrel houses, the houses of ill repute, the houses where you had prostitutes and people drinking bootleg liquor, etc., etc. So you didn't want that same type of box in a house of worship. There were elderly people who said that. I'm not going to that church anymore. They got that devil's box in there. See, so is that a devil's box? Maybe. Maybe not. See, these are questions that should be answered based on, and I came to the conclusion over a period of years, okay, later on you had tamarines in churches and whatnot.
Then you had drums,
and also in drums and whatnot. And then later guitars. And sometimes, like some people said, for sure, the devil's instrument was a saxophone, something that you would never have.
They call it the saxophone. Yeah.
Yes, they said, oh, that's the sound that comes out of that saxophone is one of the worst possible sounds you could ever have in the universe. So these things have always been debated, but it comes down to the fundamentals of music and noise. And music, by definition, is any sound, because we're just talking about sounds, that's all. Any sounds that helps a person to think constructive thoughts.
Say that again, Mr. Fuller.
By definition, compensatory definition, this is the one that I made up. It's in the book. Music is any sound, even a sound of a waterfall, the sound of a bird that's sitting on a limb tweeting, and any sound that when you hear the sound, it helps you to think constructive thoughts. That is music. I don't care what the sound is. If you're thinking a constructive thought, thinking about doing something constructive, if it makes you want to, gives you energy and want you to get up right now and go somewhere and do something constructive, or if it helps you to do something that you're already doing that's constructive, then that, by definition, is music. Now, noise is anything that helps you to think of doing something non-constructive, and that's it. You can take those labels off of jazz, gospel, hip-hop. Just forget about these terms when you start talking about sound being music and noise. Take the other blues and whatnot, take those opera, take those labels away altogether and just think of it crystal clear, you might say, as being music or noise. And you will know that by how you act when you listen to it. If you want to start doing something non-constructive, and you can always tell when somebody's doing something non-constructive, if you're inspired by this so-called music that you think you're listening to, and you're really listening to noise, and you're inspired to go somewhere and fight somebody, and there is such a thing as fighting sounds, unjust fighting. In fact, there are whole armies that have what you might call bugle corps and whatnot. And why do these armies have these people tooting horns and whatnot? Why? They're trying to inspire someone to go and fight. Drum and bugle corps, they sometimes
So what
call
you're saying
them.
is that music, I mean, this sound, music, however you define it, it has a profound effect on our emotions, and it causes us, and if it's used in a certain way, can cause us to do things, move in certain directions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and you can, absolutely, and you can always tell the difference by what the person does when they're listening to it.
Wow.
Like if you go there, I remember when back in the days when they had what you call jukebox dances, and sometimes people would start fighting while the while other people were dancing. But some people would stop dancing and start fighting. And so I noticed the owner of the place that had the jukebox would go over and pull the cord out of the wall, the electrical cord that went to the jukebox.
Right.
So that those sounds stopped coming out of the jukebox. And so at a very young age, I observed that. And I said, why did he stop the music? And because the owner of the place, I think, interpreted what was going on as not being music because the people were getting ready to tear up his place. So it ceased to be music by the way the people were acting. So he pulled the cord on that sound, S-O-U-N-D, because that's what it was. And then you had the sound of what? Silence. And the people stopped dancing, and the people stopped fighting.
Wow. You know, I'm reminded of the movie Ray. And I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It was just, I mean, it was an excellent movie. I think what you're saying is just incredible because you're absolutely correct. I always thought when you hear certain sounds, it moves you in a certain direction, doesn't it?
Well, I remember hearing, I don't know the full story, but there's a story, I mean, some people say a children's story called the Pied Piper.
Oh, yes.
Have you heard that story?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and the Pied Piper, if I recall correctly, there was a fellow who had what they call a pipe, really was a flute, pipe, musical instrument, they say. They call it a musical instrument, which a flute is. And this person in this character in the story started playing the flute, and people start following the person, listening to the flute being played. And the person marched them right down to the water, and people walked right into the water and drowned.
Wow.
Because the Pied Piper led them right into the water by the sound. So people can be motivated by certain sounds to do certain things. And these certain things are going to fall in one of two categories according to the interpretation, according to logic, either constructive or non-constructive. And that's when you can always tell when people start getting in these arguments about which is the best music to listen to and all like that. Just look at the way that people act. Then that's how you tell.
That's deep, Mr.
Well, you tell the difference between music and noise simply by what people do when they're listening to it, how they think, how they talk, what it makes them do. Now,
what it produces.
Yes, you gave an illustration of a person who got out of a car and had his pants hanging down.
Oh yeah,
and had this sound. That's S-O-U-N-D. I won't call it music. I won't call it noise. But what was he doing when he was listening to it and trying to get other people to listen? That's why he turned it up. Because he not only wanted to do these things himself, apparently, whatever he was doing, but he wanted other people to get on that wavelength and think the same way. Now, what was the message? If it was a message in words along with the beat of the drums or the instruments and all like that, which is sort of neutral, you might say, quote, unquote, depending on what you mean by neutral, but you also listen to the words of a song and say, now, what are the words that I'm listening to? When I hear them, what am I supposed to be inspired to do?
Mr. Fuller, stay right there. My goodness, we're just beginning this journey. And this is an area that we haven't touched on before, so it's kind of exciting just to hear this breakdown. Stay right there. More to come.
This program is brought to you by ClaySpace, a passion for pottery, art for the soul. 614-449-8144 or clayspace831.com.
Wake up, everybody. This is Ted Williams, and you're listening to Afternoon Delight, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
Sky rockets in flight. Afternoon Delight.
This is Ted Williams, and you're listening to Afternoon Delight, baby.
Afternoon Delight.
This is Ted Williams, and this is Afternoon Delight.
Afternoon Delight.
I'm Ted Williams, and this is Afternoon Delight on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
Sky rockets in flight. Afternoon Delight.
Hi, I'm back. This is your platter playing Papa. Spinning the wax on Afternoon Delight. This is the Golden Voice. I'm Ted Williams, right back and smack at you on TalkTenantRadio.com.
Ted,
Where are you?
When are you coming?
Who are these imposters?
March 18th.
Hurry up and get here.
Afternoon Delight.
Peace Corps. Life is calling. How far will you go? To find out more, call 1-800-424-8580.
I mean, this is fascinating, a fascinating discussion, and it's not the kind of discussion that you get a lot when you talk about music or sound. We really don't get into it that deep. We just get into what artists we like, why we like them, but we don't understand all of the ramifications of how you mix a horn with a beat, with violins, with lyrics, and a tone of what, and it creates a feeling. I was talking to Mr. Brother Ed earlier. We were talking about Billy Stewart and the song he used to sing, "Sitting in the Park," and how, as young men, we remembered just what it did for us, how it really spoke to us in all of our youth, and we were getting messages about feelings and emotions and how, what it caused us to do. Well, I said all that to say I'm looking at what we are getting now, the behavior, and I think you're on to something, Mr. Fuller, real deep, when you talk about the behavior that comes from this sound, this noise, or in some cases, this music that we hear. Mr. Fuller, take it from there, sir.
I'd like for the audience, those who have seen the movie Shawshank Redemption, it shows on some of the cable channels quite frequently. It's considered to be a classic, that particular movie. It's about people in a prison. And there's a scene in the movie, Shawshank Redemption, where a character named Andy Dufresne is in the warden's office, and he decides to put on the loudspeaker system a record of a couple of Italian ladies who are singing opera. And he puts this record on and turns on the speaker, and the people who were out in the prison yard, the prisoners, were listening to this all of a sudden, because they never heard any type of sounds of any kind of what you might call music, or what most people would call music, in that prison, apparently, at any time. So when he put that record on, the prisoners in the prison yard, going through their routines of just, passing the time in the prison yard when they're not in the cells, they became transfixed, looking at that speaker that was up on a post. And they all looked toward it, like looking toward the heavens. And the voice in the background of Morgan Freeman, who played the part of a character named Red, said, "I don't know what those Italian ladies were singing, but somehow, something in their voices, even to this day, I mean, right now, at this moment, something in their voices gave us a feeling of feeling a little bit human, a little bit, and it's a very well done scene. A lot of people need to see that scene in that movie because it's about the effects of sound. And later on, the character in the movie, Andy Dufresne, said, even when I was in later on, as a punishment for having played that record in the warden's office against the warden's instructions, or the warden's desires, he got 2 weeks in solitary confinement.
Mr. Fuller, I think I've got this scene that you're talking about. I think I've been able to pull it up. I'm going to play it in a minute, and so folk can hear more specifically what this is. I think this is the scene. Let me try and see if I've got it. Yeah, well, what he's doing in this scene, Mr. Fuller, he is pulling out. He's pulling out an album. Now, for those people who don't know what an album is now, it's kind of old school. I guess we date ourselves a little bit. But he's pulling out an album with a long plane. I guess, what would they call it, Mr. Fuller? 78?
That's what they call it, long plane.
Yeah, but I see what you mean, because as you listen to it, you do feel a sense of warmth, a sense of humanity, a sense of a sense that you belong.
Yes.
I see what you're saying. So it creates, you can either use it for a constructive purpose or destructive purpose. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. It's just two types of it's all about sound, and it's only according to compensatory logic, I call it. I just tapped into it and came to that conclusion that it's just two types of sound in the entire world, in the entire universe. Just two types. Not a number of types. There's music and then there's noise. And the difference between the two types of sound is when you hear music, you know that you're hearing music when you think constructively. When your mind begins to think about constructive thoughts, think about doing something that makes sense, then that is music. If you think about doing something that's non-constructive, think about, just breaking up something or just throwing things with no reason at all that.
I got my hand on the Glock and I got my hand on the knife.
There you go. I mean, just hitting somebody over the head, for no reason at all, or just cursing somebody out and whatnot, just because they happen to be standing there and whatnot. Now, and you're listening to something that inspires you to do that, then you can categorically call that, in a compensatory way, according to logic, you call that noise, because it's making you do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do if you weren't listening to it. And these are conclusions that I came to, and I think they'll hold up scientifically.
Oh, I do too. And then when you mix it with alcohol, things that also get inside of your head and really change how that either bring something out or bring something forward. Those two combinations, Mr. Fuller, are lethal, aren't they?
Because alcohol throws a person's mind out of balance. And so when you're listening to something that throws you out of balance with the universe the way that it ought to be, and you are drinking something that's helping to throw you out of balance, then you get into what you might call extreme imbalance. You're extremely out of balance with things that should be balanced, because when things are balanced, then things work much better. That's like, a car that has 4 tires and one of the tires is flat. That's out of balance. And so everything in the universe is either in balance or out of balance. And when it's out of balance, ugly things begin to happen. And the white supremacist system is designed to throw non-white people out of balance, including the type of sounds that they like to produce, and help black people produce for themselves to listen to that will keep them out of balance all the time. And I want to say this about sound, too. The same sounds that can be constructive during one period can be non-constructive during another period. So it's all about the balance and proportion.
What do you mean, Mr. Fuller?
Meaning, I'll give you a very simple example. A person can get up in the morning, like some people do, and the first thing they want to hear is some type of sound that they call their favorite music. Some people wake up that way, all right? So, that gets their day started. So they will put on a favorite record or something like that in the background while they're getting ready to go to work or something like that. Or they might, while driving down the highway, they'll turn on a certain station, and because they're looking for a certain type of sound to be coming out in the form of what they call music. But now, let's say that same person during that same day would play that sound all day long, that same record by that same artist, the same exact sound that they were getting all enthusiastic about when they heard it at 9 o'clock that morning. But now the record is playing over and over again as they sit at their desk in the office or they're in the warehouse. That same record is played over and over again, over and over again. That's their favorite record now. Their favorite of all time. But it's played over and over again. And when they get off from work, it's playing on the radio. And when they get home, it's playing. And after they get home, it's still playing everywhere. That record is playing, just that same record. Now, whereas that was a satisfying record when it first started at 9 o'clock that morning, by 12 o'clock that night. That is no longer a pleasant sound, even though it's the same record. The person is listening to the same record, but they'll say, I'm tired of listening to that. Turn that off. See, now the record has become torture. It was satisfied at 9 o'clock in the morning, but by 1 o'clock that next morning, and they are trying to sleep, and it's still playing over and over again. Now the person says, I've had enough of that.
Like they do in prisons. Like
And
they
you
do
can,
when
yes,
they're
you can
torturing people. Yeah.
yes, you can simply ask them, say, well, I thought that was your favorite record. Yes, that was my favorite record, but my goodness, I don't want to hear it over and over again all the time forever. See? So, but it's the same exact sound. See what I mean? So what changed? Did the sound change? No. The person changed. That's the criteria. See, they have what you call war dances and whatnot. I mean, among some tribes.
That's true.
And while they are dancing, they are thinking about going to war.
Wow.
And then when they stop dancing, that's exactly what they do. Go to war. When the cavalry is charging, who's out there in front? I mean, that bugler. And he's piping them up, and the horses are galloping and whatnot. And it's coming out. What's coming out of that bugle is da 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 da. You know, see the old Western, so-called Western movies and whatnot, and you see the cavalry making their charge, and everybody's all fired up about doing what? Killing people. And so the sound is not killing anybody. That's just sound. That's just a person on a bugle. Sometimes, I mean, the bugle is shot, and another bugler picks up the bugle and carries on, because you got to keep everybody all pumped up now. So, in the system of racism, the racists figured it out a long time ago. That what you do, if you want to guide these people, you decide what they will listen to in the way of the sounds of the universe. And someone once penned this statement, if I have it correctly. They said, let me write the songs for people, and it makes no difference who writes their laws.
Wow. Say that again. Let me write the songs for the people.
Let me write the songs for a group of people, and it makes no difference who writes their laws, because the songs will be the greatest influence.
Wow. That's heavy. Mr. Fuller, stay right there. Stay right there. This is something that we have never covered, but this is incredible. This is just incredible. I think on this one we're going to have to do a part 2 and 3, Mr. Fuller. Stay right there.
Yes, sounds inspire people. Yeah, that's what it's for. Any musician will tell you that the whole purpose for having what you call a quote-unquote musical instrument is to inspire people, is to work on people's minds, get them to think in a certain way. That's the whole purpose for it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to anything. I mean, it would make no sense to have what you call orchestras or music programs and or musical instruments. It's a reason for this. And you're trying to work on what? People's minds. See, just the sound of a drum, the sound of water dripping is supposed to have an effect. That's a sound. If you hear this water dripping, this steady dripping, it's going to have an effect. Because if that water is dripping on a tin bucket or something like that, and this makes a kind of a dripping sound, whatever that sound might be, of just water steady dripping, it's going to have an effect on whomever is listening to that water dripping. Someone might say, someone is trying to do something. They're trying to do something that calls for meticulous concentration, like doing some type of engraving or something, or some type of painting. But in the background, they hear water dripping. And at some point, that artist might say, let's find out where that dripping water is coming from. It's disturbing me. This is disturbing me. In other words, that's noise. I'm trying to do something constructive here. and that dripping water is interfering with my thoughts. I'm doing some mathematical calculations here that nobody's ever done before. And but the sound of there's a sink that's dripping somewhere. Someone go in the other room and find out what and cut that off, because it is bothering me. Now, what is the artist saying? That is noise. That is not music. The sound of that dripping water. It might be music to someone else's ears. It might even be music to my ears if I'm writing a poem about dripping water. But right now I'm not doing that. So that particular sound, and of course I want to get back to this thing about it's just two types of sound, music and noise. Mm-hmm. And the difference between the two types is music helps you to think about doing things that are constructive. Noise impels you, influences you to do things that are non-constructive. And that's the only difference.
That's the criteria.
Yes, that's the criteria. I think if everybody picks up that criteria when they're listening to any kind of sound, the sound of a truck going through down the street, is that noise or is that music? The sound of a siren, is that noise or is that music? To most people who are in traffic and whatnot and have to pull over, that's noise.
I think very few
but
people.
But that's music to the ears of the person who is lying in the street waiting to be picked up.
Yeah. Yes,
right.
Definitely. And I think most people don't really understand just the power that this music has. I watched, for example, and I'm sure, and I know you've studied it, what happened, and I hate to use, I'll say non-constructive music, came in around the 90s.
Non-constructive sound.
Non-constructive sound, I'm sorry. Some start calling it, they put a lot of names on it. Could have been gangster or whatever. But what I noticed was the change in the behavior. The change in the behavior. The way the clothes were worn, the language, the level of disrespect, all of these things. I think you're hitting. I think you're there. Something happened to people when that sound changed. It really, it really did affect behavior. And a classic example is country music. Look at country music. A whole way of life is built around the sound or music. It's built around it, from clothes to language, everything. And we see the same thing when these elements begin to appear in the sound or the music or whatever noise, however you want to go with it. It had what I would call a non-constructive effect. Mr. Fuller.
Yes, and also you can control how people will behave. That's because it's all about behavior. That's why it's sound. These sounds of music, sounds of noise. Now, say, for example, I'll give an example. Say that in this day and time, because it works even in this day and time, mm-hmm. a person wants to run a business, but it's a certain, what they might call, element that they don't want to come in their establishment. Mm. All right? Mm-hmm. So I want to run, say, a business where people come all dressed up, and people who are going to take up their positions with tablecloths and whatnot. It's a restaurant-type place and whatnot. Quiet, family-type place, they call it, traditional family. Mm-hmm. It's going to be quiet and sedate, and what they call, to use a cliche term, upscale. Mm-hmm. And you don't want what they call riffraff.
And
people.
That's why you dress up.
Yes, you dress up. That's why they call it up. All right, upscale dress, upscale decor. Mm-hmm. All right. So, but you're in a section of the city where you have people who may be, inclined to be drug addicts or whatnot, or people who like to hang out, you might say, in places where they fight all the time and all like that. So you happen to be located there. So what do? You want to influence them with sound. And what type of sound will you have? Well, rather than something that's going to draw them into the place, you have something that's going to be repellent to them. And what will you do most likely? And this has actually happened. You have maybe a little speaker, not too loud and whatnot, where you can even hear it from the outside, but it's all opera. Okay?
Oh my goodness, that's heavy.
So, homeboy might come to the glass window and look in, but he's not going in because that's not the type of sound that he can relate to very well. That sound is not soothing to him at all. So that must not be the place. He's going further down the block. I'm trying to find a place where, he finds something that's more to his liking and his frame of mind while he's looking for the next bottle of wine, all right? And so the sounds that would be coming out of that place would be different.
And that's true because at summer events, when they want to keep the fighting down, it's true. When they want to keep the fighting and conflict down, they will have like jazz artists that will come. Or people, they won't bring any so-called hip-hop or rap. They won't bring that because they know when they bring that, you're going to have extra security because of
You're going to have extra security because people are going to listen to the sounds and they're going to be inspired to do certain things that may call for security.
Mr. Fuller, I think about the commercials that are used to sell products. I think about the movies that are, where the soundtracks are used. And I don't think many of us really think hard enough about just how powerful sound is in our lives. I think we just go through life. We don't really analyze it, think about it, break it down, and look at the impact it has on our behavior. We really don't, do we?
Apparently not. I mean, when you think about it, it becomes more and more things become obvious, you might say, when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
In a prison, what do when they want to chastise someone in the prison? They send them to what they call solitary confinement, where you listen to the sound of silence.
Wow.
And the sound of silence for a person who is used to a lot of different sounds going on, mostly noise, is very punishing. That is extreme punishment.
Now, Mr. Fuller, you talked about sounds that can kind of push you to war. I'm going to play one that I thought I didn't understand it at the time it came out because, well, I think I'm going to get to it. I'm going to try to get to it. I didn't understand it at the time that it came out because I didn't really have a chance to study or watch the movie.
Sounds like something that would inspire people to get moving, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It would.
Right.
It almost sounds to me
to get on horseback and take off.
Teddy Roosevelt kind of stuff. It almost sounds like if I were going to do an invasion, and you've been in the military, if I were going to do an invasion or I was going to come in to somebody's area or take a area away from a people, wouldn't that kind of music along those lines, wouldn't that kind of music inspire you to charge and go forward to make that happen?
Well, I think that type of sound has been designed, has been finely crafted to do just that. There is such a thing as what they call martial music or military music. They have military bands. And these are soldiers, and you got them playing horns and got xylophones and sometimes accordions and whatnot. What is all that for? It must be to inspire someone to do something. Something like what? Something like put on a uniform and grab a rifle maybe and maybe shoot somebody.
And go kill.
And go and kill. Otherwise, what do you need it for? You got 30 or 40 people there who are supposed to be trained soldiers, and you have them playing musical or sound instruments that just produce sound. What's the sound for? I mean, there's no bullets there. There's no rifles there. There's no swords involved. What is it for? Must be to inspire someone to do something. Inspire them how? By having them think a certain way. What certain way? Well, you look at the results, and I think some military bands has probably even changed their sounds down through the ages. They will look at what they are playing, and they're saying, well, these people are not very inspired by this last 3 or 4 songs that we have here. So we have to get back to do some more songwriting. Because on that last charge that we made, it looks like they kind of got tired too quick.
Now, Mr.
So we
Fuller,
need something to keep them pepped up.
right. Does the
Right.
music then, is it in the military, is it designed to glorify killing? Is that what it's designed to do?
Can't be designed to do anything else. To make the people feel that they are part of something that has to do. Now, sometimes it's not so much just the battle itself, but to make people think that they are have association with people who can relate to each other in a battle. And so it's got to have a reason. Otherwise, there would be no military bands at all. None. It's got to have a reason.
Mr.
And it
Fuller,
goes all the way back through history. As long as there's been the military, someone thought of it. These people need to be inspired. So let's get some sticks and a log and some sticks and beat on the log or something, or carry the log, or let's get some canvas or something, or let's get some type of steel, that you bang on, get some tubs or whatnot, and put those people out front so that these soldiers will be inspired. They're too lethargic. They act like they're really not too much into going into this battle. So we need to pump them up a little bit. We don't have any chemicals or anything that, we think that would work. So maybe they listen to some sounds, And sometimes it's just the sounds of what they call the cadences. Hup, 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 That's a sound. That's a form of sound that causes people to march in a certain way.
got about 30 seconds, Mr. Fuller. Give me your closing thoughts on this.
Well, the closing thoughts is that everybody should think about the sounds that they're listening to. 2 types of sound in the entire universe, just 2. Not a variety, just 2. Music and noise. And how do you tell the difference? Music helps you to think about doing things that are constructive. Noise helps you to think about doing things that are non-constructive. And that's the only difference.
Thank you,
Just 2.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. This has been a fascinating discussion.
You got the power. Radio, the way it should be heard.